average tuition fee of £7,500 or less. And it may be that will have the impact of driving more universities to lower their fees. And the danger, again, is that leads to a polarity between the types of students that go to those different types of universities, those that are charging below 7.5 and those that are in the AAB camp. And again, that's something we need to monitor and look at very carefully. This particularly, I think, in terms of the widening participation debate, also raises questions about how we deal with equivalent qualifications, for example, for mature students who don't fall within these categories very easily. And we have to make sure that as part of this discourse, we're thinking about impact on mature students as we go forward. One of the concerns we're also very concerned about, very worried about, is whether or not these core margin proposals can undermine the very positive collaborative partnership agreements that many higher education institutions have with further education colleges. We're actively discussing how we can make sure that that does not happen. I think there's a real sense of the value that those collaborative arrangements can bring to both FE colleges and universities, but most importantly to non-traditional students. And again, it falls on all of us, our responsibilities to make sure that the funding arrangements don't undermine those arrangements. And I understand you've got a workshop later today which will be talking about exactly those issues. My third challenge is the speed of the reforms. Maybe it has had to be the case, but nonetheless the pace of change has had some unfortunate consequences, not least the fact that some institutions have had to change their financial support packages or fee levels in the middle of the recruitment cycle in order to allow them to bid for the 20,000 student places. And that is not an ideal situation where universities were compelled effectively to add to potential confusion amongst applicants as to what fee levels were. It was complicated enough without that. And again, it's, I think, played badly in the press, and I think has caused us additional complications. But nonetheless, I think we're past that now, and I think as long as we make sure in the future that we don't have mid-cycle changes, then that hopefully will not happen again. But also, and perhaps more significantly in terms of the speed of change, we are very concerned that there is an appetite for further deregulation before we've seen what the impact of the 2012-13 reforms are. And we don't know what student choices is going to be, what they're going to make. We're not sure what decisions they're going to make as to whether to go to university, what universities they're going to choose, which groups of students are going to go where. And all of that uncertainty is leading to UUK calling on government for stability in 13-14 so that we can review the impact of 12-13 before making further changes to policy. And I think that's a really important message that we're trying to get over, that if we are serious about social mobility, if we are serious about widening participation, then we've really got to look at the impact of 12-13 before deciding what should happen in 13-14. Otherwise, we are dealing with policy-based evidence and not evidence-based policy. And I think all of us should be pushing for that degree of stability in order to evaluate the impact of these changes. Finally, I want to touch on admissions and say a few words about how these changes to higher education impact on the admissions process. There's been a lot of work done on fair admissions. We know that universities are absolutely committed to this agenda. Principles of transparent entry criteria, selecting on the basis of potential, using methods of assessment that are reliable and valid, minimising barriers and ensuring that the process is properly resourced and so on. And SPA, Supporting Professionalism and Admissions, and I believe they're doing one of the workshops later here today, will be revisiting the principles of fair access, working with representatives from schools and universities. And we'll report on this by mid-2012. And part of their programme also includes work on the use of contextual data. Contextual data is a critically important area, one that we spend a lot of time talking about at Universities UK. We've become more sophisticated in the use of contextual data, but however you look at it going forward, particularly given the increased focus on prior attainment, currently AAB, We cannot and should not have that discussion about AAP as an entrance criteria without also, in the same breath, thinking through the implications for contextual data for students from different backgrounds and how we can mitigate the use of prior attainment by drawing on well-established and transparent principles of contextual data so that we're all agreed on what the best methodologies are and how we can use them going forward. And that is an area I think that we need to conduct more research on. SPA is doing that, supported by HEFCE, and they will be producing an overview of the use of contextual data across a number of universities and colleges, and I think that's wholly to be welcomed. That will include examples of good practice from case study institutions, and their report will be available by early January. Then in spring, we expect to see the government publish a higher education bill, bringing forward legislative change to underpin the white paper reforms. Much of the debate will be about the regulatory framework, in particular the evolving role of HEFCE and the Office of Fair Access. There is a real risk, that universities are going to face stricter penalties for failing to meet access targets, and the government's already firming up on its rhetoric about this. I don't know what Anna Milburn will have to say, but from our perspective, understanding these targets and institutional performance is complex, and there are many reasons why an institution may miss its target. Some of them may have absolutely nothing to do with the determination and goodwill of the institution and its commitment to widening participation. So although we support the shift of focus by offer to outputs and assessing impact as opposed to inputs and processes, we would be very concerned if the government were to enable offer to impose fines on institutions where they miss their target without a very detailed and thoughtful and sophisticated analysis of why that situation came about. That's not to suggest, of course, that there's more that universities can't do in this area, and I think there's real danger in how we present this sort of issue, and that it doesn't appear defensive or complacent, because we all know that there's very much more that can be done, not just in terms of widening participation, but also access to selective institutions, and we do need to be open and engaging about that. On that theme, it is, I think, slightly depressing, excuse me one second, that the public discourse and the political discourse is so fixated on the issue of access to the most selective institutions. Politicians seem to be completely obsessed by the 3,000 students who didn't get the grade to go to the most selective institutions, but do go to other universities, very good universities, ignoring the 360,000 students who have the qualifications to go to university and don't go. It's not to say that one is more important than the other, and at UK we're very clear that both access to selective institutions and widening participation to universities is important, but I think it's very important that both are in the balance, and I think it will be interesting to see how Alan Milburn presents that issue this afternoon. And then finally, we have UCAS moving towards admissions with results, consultation out at the moment, which many of us will be making submissions to. When this was discussed at the UK board, we all agreed that actually the most critical issue here was widening participation. How does this play to social mobility? And I think as we go forward in submitting our responses to that UCAS consultation, that perhaps is not the only thing that matters, but definitely the most important thing. And we really need to think carefully about what the implications are, whether or not admissions with results does genuinely help the widening participation and access agenda or not. I should finally add on that although admissions with results is the aspect of the UCAS consultation that has attracted most attention, there are also many other aspects of that consultation which we are really keen to see taken forward, not least the simplification of the system and seeing whether we can do more with the clearing system so it supports students and it isn't so unbelievably baffling and pressurised on indeed institutions as well as students, but I think all of us agreed we can and should do better. So, in conclusion, I think that as we move towards a more student-centred market where there's deregulation of tuition fees, deregulation of admissions, this is broadly a positive environment for us to be moving into. And we absolutely welcome the increased funding that's available to universities. The alternative would have been very much worse. But nonetheless, I think that the challenges that we're facing are huge. We need to be measured and thoughtful. And as John said, I think most of all, we really need to work in partnership even more than before to ensure that we're dealing with some of these challenges which cut across the individual activities of so many individual organisations. So looking to the future in the next 12 months, I think strengthening those partnerships and collaboration is the only way forward. It's the only way forward given tightened resources, but it's also the only way forward if we are to have any hope of dealing with some of these really entrenched and really difficult issues that we're facing in terms of access and widening participation. And I was therefore very interested in what John had to say about the changes to Action on Access and the range of different services that it will be offering and how it's structured. I think that is really excellent news, and at UK we very much look forward to working even more closely with that Action on Access and associated partners in the future, partnerships. And I think, particularly given the loss of Aim Higher, this just is absolutely critical so that we can see how we can support what's happening in terms of substituting for the loss of Aim Higher work in different ways. To finish on a positive note, another positive note, I think it is significant that TEFCI continues to make clear its commitment to funding for widening participation. That is something which we wholeheartedly welcome. The second consultation by HEFCI on proposals for implementing changes to the funding methods is expected in February 2012. That'll be a really significant consultation, and it will provide all of us with the opportunity to communicate the need for the continuation of this stream of funding to take account of the additional costs that are associated with students from non-traditional backgrounds. And to support this and taking account of the straitened financial circumstances that HEFCI finds itself in, the UK is building a case for establishing how we can best target WP funding so that it's most effective in terms of its output. So there we go. We have a strong record. We have a proud record. We have a declared commitment from government, and we would be very foolish not to take advantage and capitalise on that to prioritise this agenda. But we do face very significant challenges, of which funding reforms and student number controls are perhaps the most obvious, but also the impact of student choice and how some really deep-rooted social disadvantage can play out through the heightened ability of students to make choices as to what it is that they're choosing to do and where. We have to deal with the speed of responses, and we have to deal with the fact that policy is moving very fast in a way that might stop us and prevent us, or at least hinder us from drawing on the evidence of the 12-13 intake to inform what happens in the future. And I think in trying to insist on evidence-based policy is really critical going forward. So we clearly have to do more. We have to do more working together and in partnership with less explicit government funding. But less explicit government funded in terms of some programmes, overall it's a positive picture, but the money is coming into universities from students, not via government itself, which is all part of a trajectory towards greater self-determination. At the end of the day, I think what's going on here, what's underpinning this, is the money is being channeled in a different way into universities, and hand in hand with that is a focus on greater self-determination and autonomy. And therefore the final conclusion, which is pretty much where John ended up in his presentation, is that actually it means that it's really up to us to shape the future agenda on social mobility and widening participation. And that has to be a good thing, and I very much look forward to seeing the work of Action on Access steaming ahead over the next 12 months and taking that agenda forward on behalf of the sector, working in partnership with all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.